to stay with the story. The presidency has, in fact, clarified why the special envoy, SABC Jonas, was not part of the president's delegation to the U.S. The presidency says he was left out at his own request, but he contributed to the preparatory engagements ahead of the meeting. The presidency has also added that Jonas has valid travel documents to the U.S. Questions arose on whether he did not travel because of his views on a president of the United States, which have been critical. All right, to unpack this all further, let's now speak to International Relations Analyst Lwazi Somya. Thank you so much, Lwazi, for your time. Perhaps let's start with the theatrics and talk about your impressions of what we saw in the Oval Office. I mean, do you think the South African delegation pushed back hard enough in its attempt, of course, to dispel the white genocide false narrative and that crime affected all races, in fact?
Thank you so much for calling me in and inviting me. So when we look at the success or failures of yesterday's encounter, we must look at it based on three objectives. The first one is whether or not South Africa has managed to reset the bilateral relationship between the United States of America and South Africa. The second one is whether or not South Africa was able to initiate discussions around a comprehensive trade and investment deal between South Africa and the United States, and whether or not South Africa was able to push back on misinformation, disinformation, especially around the notion of a white genocide and the Expropriation Act. On the first two accounts, on all accounts, South Africa has managed to do that, and that was the primary objective that the South African government wanted to achieve within Washington. And on the third objective, yes, they have managed to do that. However, lingering domestic sentiments within the United States will continue to push this narrative, especially concerning Mr. Trump's base, along with right-wing white supremacist groupings within Europe and elsewhere within the world. So it will require a more comprehensive and a more consistent pushback, not only from the South African government, but also from the South African people concerning this narrative around the white genocide, as this not only impacts the perceptions around our government, it also impacts the perceptions around our people too.
I want to then talk about, just some of the utterances that were made following that visit by President Cyril Ramaphosa, that there was a firm agreement and undertaking that engagement would then continue both bilaterally and within the G20. Just having to look at, Team SA, speak about the strategic decision then to include the likes of, powerhouse Johan Rupert, the top golfers, Jonas and Els, and of course, COSATU's president, Zingiswa Losi.
So as you know, that these are not normal times as we're dealing with the Donald Trump administration. However, what you normally see within various delegations and working visits are either citizens that are of particular interest within a particular country or various interest groups from the country. So you saw Johan Rupert representing the business interests of South Africa. You saw Zingiswa Losi representing the labor interests of South Africa. And then you saw these are Donald Trump's interest in South Africa. That's the golfing fraternity. And therefore, in this instance, South Africa is one of the first countries to utilize golfing diplomacy as a means of softening up ahead of state, ahead of very comprehensive arrangements. However, what we also saw in that meeting, even though you saw people like Dr. Person delivering mixed messaging, but you saw a rather united message concerning what the state of South Africa is. However, what also raises is what are we doing domestically to address these fundamental challenges that the delegation raised, especially concerning crime, which is obviously underpinned by poverty, unemployment, and inequality within South Africa. And therefore, this engagement itself is a means of not only preventing a jobs bloodbath within South Africa, but also facilitate a future comprehensive relationship that will not only contribute towards South Africa's economy, but also contribute towards the development and also creation of jobs within our nation, and also to secure our future political relations with the United States as South Africa continues to remain a non-aligned actor, which means it has to continue to engage with both the West and the East, and also the global North.
On this latest one now, the presidency has since clarified why Special Envoy SABC Jonas was not part of the president's delegation to the US. As the two countries reset this relationship, how do you think the Jonas question will play out?
Well, Mr. Jonas is a cog in a broader machine that South Africa and the United States are engaging on. In this instance, you heard President Cyril Ramaphosa locating the place of the negotiations being the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition as the primary custodian of this deliberation and negotiation. The envoy himself will have to come in, and as you've heard, he was also part of the preparatory team towards South Africa's deliberations with the United States. So obviously he had his hand within the package being delivered to the United States counterparts. But however, what we'll see now is how much of a role will he play going forward, especially concerning TTIC playing the leading role in terms of negotiations, and what kind of comprehensive arrangement, and whether or not, since the relations now have softened, whether or not there is a need for an envoy, and whether or not South Africa should just deploy an ambassador to go represent South Africa permanently there.
I want to then talk about, Elon Musk and his company and how much of an issue that will be in as far as Starlink is concerned. I mean, should that deal go through, what does that then tell you about South Africa's BBBE laws, for one, and also, balancing that act with trying to ease relations and tensions between the US and South Africa?
So it depends how government approaches the Starlink initiative. Yesterday, we had Minister Tau suggesting some form of equity arrangement around Starlink in South Africa. And also, how do we now manage the data processing that Starlink will be capturing with South Africa? Will be a very critical issue that the current deal and negotiations will need to resolve ahead of time, because we do not want a situation where Starlink captures the data, personal data of South Africans, and sells them off to other multinational companies at the expense of South Africa's private security. And therefore, our government, within the broader negotiation of the trade and investment deal that they're lining up with the Trump administration, needs to take into consideration of issues around data protections, how data will be stored, and the upcoming partnerships, which institutions will be partnering up with Starlink if there is a deal around Starlink coming to South Africa to protect personal data within South Africa, and what kind of arrangement will that be, and what kind of messaging will that present to your own domestic population rather than the international community, will be the presenting feature that many people will be considering in. But so far, when Elon Musk leaves the US government in the next few days, it will be another question of whether or not Starlink will be relevant within the upcoming trade and investment deal, and whether or not the Trump administration will consider him as a factor when engaging on issues around trade and investments with South Africa.
Lwazi, thank you so much for your time and your analysis. International Relations Analyst Lwazi Somya there, just weighing in on the US-SA relations.